Welcome back, it's me Lou. For today's video, we are going to talk about custom action figures, and we are going to showcase an action figure that I made tonight. So, what we have here is a custom DC Multiverse WILDC.A.T.S Grifter action figure. So, in a previous video, I reviewed the stock McFarlane version of the figure. The figure is based on Grifter's more modern, recent design that we've seen over the last maybe like 2 years. And for me, as great as that new action figure is, I was so sentimental and nostalgic for the original design of the character from the mid or early 90s, which is right here. So I kind of took it upon myself to try to create something that kind of echoes the original design of the character, but still kind of, retain some of the modern sensibilities. It's not accurate in terms of the color scheme, but in terms of the overall design and feel and aesthetic, I feel it kind of falls into line with like the original design. So the original figure, which we have here, I believe was produced in 1994 by Playmates. This was part of the WILDC.A.T.S action figure line. During this time period, they were making a cartoon series based on the popular Image comic book. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Grifter, he's a character created by artist Jim Lee in Jim Lee's comic book WILDC.A.T.S. And WILDC.A.T.S is actually an acronym. It's Wild Covert Action Teams. And I believe Grifter was initially introduced as maybe like a mercenary type character. Prior to the WILDC.A.T.S, I want to say he was on, I think it was Team 7, but I might be wrong on that. The original character had a green trench coat, like we see here. He kind of had like the superhero like swashbuckling buccaneer gloves that are kind of long, like this. He had a bandana over his face with these markings over the eyes. And much like a lot of characters in the 90s, he always had like his hair kind of like protruding from the top of his head like this. Get into focus. Why won't you focus? There you go. So this is the design I really liked. For me, this is the Grifter I grew up on. The new figure and the new design is good. It's a lot of modern sensibilities. He does away with the long jacket. Now he has a short leather jacket. His color scheme is, pretty much very similar. The greens and the reds. And I kind of wanted to take a stab at this, making my own figure. Which brings us to this. Here is my custom again. It's my custom McFarlane DC Multiverse WILDC.A.T.S Grifter. Now, I tried to retain the same design sensibility. The color scheme, of course, is different. But that was mostly because I was limited to the pieces I was working off of. So, for me, when I make a custom action figure, I like to keep the figure to look as stock as possible. I don't like to put on a lot of paint, especially like in areas where there's moving joints, because you have to deal with like paint rub and stuff like that. So I kind of wanted to keep it stock. I wanted to use other McFarlane pieces so that this felt like, like a 100% like McFarlane action figure. So for me, the solution was to make this Grifter was I needed a longer coat since the stock design had a short green leather jacket. I like the idea of the old school figure that had the rolled up sleeves, just like this one. And previously I reviewed the Batman Dark Detective action figure. There's 2 versions of the action figure. The first release had the long leather jacket, which we have right here. And what really works well is that the sleeves on the coat are actually rolled up, much like the original Grifter design right here. And also, the Dark Detective figure had the long gloves, much like the old Grifter figure. So, as soon as I saw the Dark Detective figure, the gears started spinning, and I'm like, I could totally see using that figure as the base body for creating a custom Grifter. So tonight I took it upon myself to make that figure, and here's the result. Ideally in the perfect world, I'd paint the coats green and the sleeves green just to recreate this look. But like I said, I want the figures to feel kind of stock, and sometimes when you paint, some of these pieces, you suffer from something called joint rub. The paint has a tendency to like rub off or flake off, when you start moving stuff around, especially if the joints are kind of like tightly fitted. So my excuse was, I'll leave the coat brown and just say it's kind of like a weird amalgamation of like present day Grifter and like, the Grifter from the 90s. The color scheme is going to be toned down a little and look a little bit more earthy with the brown coat. But at the same time, maybe I could kind of retain some of the 90s iconography by at least using a similar color scheme with the gloves and the mask. So with the gloves and the mask, I kind of kept it the bright red. It's kind of like Grifter's trademark look. But the coat, the longer coat for me just screams Grifter. So the longer coat, like I said, was taken from the Dark Detective Batman figure, and it was kind of a nightmare to remove. The original figure, which we have right here, this is the original Grifter jacket. I just swapped the coats. There was like a socket in his back, and there was like a peg on the back of the coat, and it was like glued on. It was like impossible to tear off. And likewise with Grifter, removing the green coat off of his body was a nightmare also. Over here, there were these large green tabs that plugged into Grifter's chest. I had to like cut those out and then clean it up. But overall, I was able to swap the pieces and it worked. I believe one of these figures, the joints that plug into the sockets of the arms is slightly larger on one figure than the other. But they were still compatible, thankfully. So yeah, here's my custom Grifter. It's kind of a throwback to the old 90s design. In a perfect world, if I was a brilliant painter and I could deal with, painting this properly without getting any joint rub, I would love to have this coat be green, just like this one. But for me, I just tell myself, this is a much more modern sensibility when it comes to his color scheme. It's a little bit more grounded. And the only thing that really screams superhero about it is the red mask and the red gloves. Otherwise, this looks, a little bit more on the, I don't want to say realistic side, but it's not as loud as having like a green trench coat like this. It's a little bit more subdued. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked on this custom action figure. I'd love to do more custom Wildcat figures. Like Spartan is one of my favorite characters from that time period, and if I could get away making a custom of him, I'd be like in heaven. Alright, so let's wrap this video up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you are new to my channel, welcome. If you are a returning viewer or subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support. So, until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I will see you at the next one. Alright, later.